All learning concerning man, ranging from history to linguistics and psychology, are faced with the question whether in the last instance we are the product of all kinds of external factors, or if in spite of our differences we have something we could call a common human nature by which we can call each other human beings. So my first question is to Mr. Tshomsky, because you, Mr. Tshomsky, employ often the concept of human nature, and even in this connection you are using terms like innate ideas and innate structures. Which arguments can you derive from linguistics in order to give such a central position to this notion of human nature?
Well, let me begin in a slightly technical way. A person who's interested in studying language is faced with a very definite empirical problem. He's faced with an organism, a mature, let's say adult speaker, who has somehow acquired an amazing range of abilities which enable him in particular to say what he means, to understand what people say to him, to do this in a fashion that I think it's proper to call highly creative. Now, the person who's acquired this intricate and highly articulated and organized collection of abilities, the collection of abilities that we call knowing a language, that person has been exposed to a certain experience. He has been presented in the course of his lifetime with a certain amount of data, of direct experience with the language. And we can investigate the data that's available to this person. And having done so, in principle, we're faced with a very clear and a reasonably clear and well-delineated scientific problem, namely the problem of accounting for the gap between the really quite small quantity of data, small and rather degenerate quantity of data that's presented to the person, to the child, and the very highly articulated, highly systematic, profoundly organized, resulting knowledge that he somehow derives from this data. Furthermore, even more remarkable, we notice that in a wide range of languages, in fact all that have been studied seriously, there are remarkable limitations on the kinds of system that emerge from the very different kinds of experience to which people are exposed. Well, there's only one possible explanation for, what one can say in a rather schematic fashion, for this remarkable phenomenon, namely the assumption that the individual himself contributes a good deal, an overwhelming part, in fact, of the general schematic structure and perhaps even of the specific content of the knowledge that he ultimately derives from this very scattered and limited experience. That is, to put it rather loosely, the child must begin with the knowledge, certainly not with the knowledge that he's hearing English or Dutch or French or something else, but he does start with the knowledge that he's hearing a human language of a very narrow and explicit type that permits a very small range of variation. And it's because he begins with that highly organized and very restrictive schematism that he's able to make the huge leap from scattered and degenerate data to highly organized knowledge. And I would claim then that this instinctive knowledge, if you like, this schematism that makes it possible to derive complex and intricate knowledge on the basis of very partial data, is one fundamental constituent of human nature. But then I assume that in other domains of human intelligence and other domains of human cognition and even behavior, something of the same sort must be true. Well, the collection of this mass of innate schematisms, innate organizing principles, which guides our social and intellectual and individual behavior, that's what I mean to refer to by the concept of human nature.
Well, Mr. Foucault, if I'm thinking at your books like Histoire de la folie et Le mot et les choses, I got the impression that you are working on a completely different level and also just with an opposite aim, opposite goal. if I'm thinking about the word schematism in relation to human nature, then you are just trying to work out that there are several periods, several schematisms. What do you think about this?
Well, if you permit, I will answer in French, because my English is so bad that I would be ashamed to answer in English.
It is true that I mistrust the notion of human nature a little, and for the following reason. I believe that the concepts or notions that a science can use, not all have the same degree of elaboration. Let's take the example of biology. Within the field of biology, there are concepts that are more or less well established, like the concept of a reflex. But there also exist peripheral notions which do not play an organizing role within science. They are not instruments of analysis, and they are not descriptive either. These notions simply serve to point out some problems, or rather, to point out certain fields in need of study.
Ou encore qui servent à indiquer des domaines d'objets à étudier. Prenez, par exemple,
for instance, there exists a very important concept in the field of biology,
c'est tout simplement la notion de vie.
The concept of life.
Au XVIIe,
in the 17th and 18th centuries, the notion of life was hardly used when studying nature.
ne se servait pas du concept de vie. Il classait les
One
êtres
classified natural beings, whether living or non-living, in a vast hierarchical tableau.
La vie était un
Life was a concept they didn't use and didn't need.
n'avait pas besoin. Et puis, à la fin du XVIIIe
At the end of the 18th century, a number of problems arose.
comme par exemple les problèmes
For instance, in relation to the internal organization of these natural beings.
la classification. Ou bien encore,
Moreover,
avec les
thanks to the use of the microscope,
microscope, le microscope d'Amici, on a vu
different
apparaître
sorts of phenomena and mechanisms that had been unclear in the past and could not have been perceived until then suddenly came to light.
dont le fonctionnement n'était pas encore clair. Les progrès de la
The developments in chemistry have also highlighted certain problems in relation to the connections between chemical reactions and the physiological processes of organisms.
physiologique de l'organisme. Et voilà que tout un domaine
And that's how an entire field appeared, one that was completely new for biologists, one that is nowadays known as life.
Et la vie, c'était une notion
Life was a concept that served to point out new fields of study that science still had to discover.
que la science avait à parcourir. Bon, et
I would say, as a historian of science, that the concept of life was an epistemological indicator,
indicateur épistémologique,
an
un
index of the problems that still had to be uncovered. And I asked myself whether perhaps one could say the same thing about human nature.
nature humaine.